And welcome to Forever Great in Conversation. It's episode 4 and I am really pleased to say that I've managed to track down this guy. I've been chapping at his door, his virtual door, for some time, and I am delighted to say we've got Alan Mahon who is joining us. Alan, how are you doing?
I'm good, yes, I'm very good. I'm very jealous that you have a nice sunny day over in the West Coast when I have an absolute stinker on the East, but other than that, I can't complain.
Great, listen, it's great to see you. You have got some form of beautiful tree behind you as well, or plant. You're obviously looking after that, so...
Yes, someone's looking after it, put it that way.
You must be getting some sort of sunshine over on the East Coast. Anyway, before we have a good conversation with Alan on this episode, I just want to say thank you so much for your support so far, listening to the podcast and also watching on the YouTube channel. Please continue to share the conversations and get these great podcasts and chats across the country. Okay, so who is Alan? Let's give you a brief bio and who he is and what he's all about. Alan is the founder of Brewgooder, the profit for purpose beer brand, whose beer is brewed on purpose. Each Brewgooder beer creates waves of people positivity, with every pint unlocking 100 pints of clear water on projects in over 20 countries. Since 2016, Brewgooder has unlocked over 100 million litres of empowering clean water, impacting the lives of over 155,000 people. What an incredible achievement. And inspired by his love for beer and a personal illness from unsafe water, at the young age of 22, Alan has built the brand into a 1 million year business, which is setting trends within the craft beer industry. He has been recognised as the Big Issue's 100 Changemakers in the UK in 2019. Wow, what an intro, man.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit embarrassing sometimes. I don't really like to hear people talking about me, but at least they're saying nice things.
All good stuff. And listen, well done. What an achievement, first and foremost, Alan. I've monitored your journey and I've reviewed in admiration your journey over these past years, and what a place you've managed to get Brewgooder to. Let's start with, I suppose, asking you, how's this year been for you personally?
I think for me, it's been super, super challenging in some ways for obvious reasons. But in other ways, it's actually been a kind of unique time that I don't think will be repeated. Personally, I guess, don't think will be repeated professionally. And I feel like we've come out the other end of it in a really different headspace than when we went in. And I can't say that that's all positive or that's all negative.
Uh-huh.
I think you kind of value quality of life stuff a lot now. I certainly value the mental health aspects of what I do, and maybe some of the more unsustainable elements of, I guess, the entrepreneurial lifestyle that I had pre-pandemic, if you like.
Uh-huh.
So I try to put a lot more weight on doing things that actually take me away from work when I get stressed, or, especially when it comes into summer, and, today being a notable exception, when there's brighter mornings and brighter evenings, trying to use that time to be outside, to be on the water, to be cycling, increasingly to value the times, the simple stuff like having a pint, you know what I mean, which is coming back. Absolutely. So for me, it's definitely been, I think, maybe a maturing experience, and I think that's almost been replicated on the business side of things. And if I look at where we started the pandemic, I mean, it was a story in and of itself, and I know everyone will have their sort of, we were going to do this, and then the COVID happened. But for us, it was spookily weird how it kind of happened on the 1 week that was meant to be our big bonanza. So part of what we had spent the whole of 2019 doing was actually speaking to breweries across the world to ask them to release a beer with us in their home city, through their tap rooms, through their bars, online, whatever. And we were asking them to do that on the 20th of March, 2020, which was going to be our 5th birthday.
Wow.
And we had managed to convince 254 breweries from across the world to do that. A lot of them were, breweries that I genuinely admire and love, and, absolutely unashamedly a fan of. And it kind of seemed like it was too good to be true.
Oh.
There was breweries from Hong Kong to Vancouver. There was breweries from Reykjavik to Sydney. And as we started getting closer and closer, we started noticing that this thing was happening. And the biggest sort of, knock at the door was when Denmark went into lockdown, and we had about 6 or 7 different Danish brewers, and they all decided that they would still release the beer, but they would do it online and whatever. But, the fundraising element of why they were doing it, it was to raise money for the projects that we support in Malawi. They were kind of saying, we might not do this, if that makes sense, or we can't do it and we can't guarantee. And then, little by little, we just realized that this wasn't going to happen. So we basically told all the brewers to just buckle up and hopefully survive, and, we'll get them next time round. Yeah. But even in spite of that, Boris Johnson comes on TV, on the Friday that it's meant to kick off that weekend. And we were trying to, just a month previous, have a global gathering of people coming and celebrating the power of craft beer to do something pretty powerful. And on that day, everything was shut down. So it was almost like there was a very definite sense for me that the old world, or the old business model that we had, was completely dead in the water. And to the credit of those brewers, they did end up raising over £50,000 that we invested in 2 healthcare facilities in Malawi that serviced lots of frontline workers and lots of frontline activity that went into the sort of hygiene and sanitation to prevent the spread of COVID, which was a remarkable result in terms of impact. But for me, I've basically spent, I guess, the past year trying to figure out what exactly is Brewgooder and what does it do, and how can we connect every drinker with what they unlock, in essence. Yeah. And we've gone through a journey of really looking under the hood of how much does each can then generate, how much does each pint generate, because we had 5 years of working on projects under our bag and costing that out and working out, how we could fund this and how we could directly link it. So the big nugget for me is that stop, that sort of, you can't do this anymore like this, was actually brilliant, because it really made us think about what our business was, what our brand was. And we got to the point where we realized that if we actually put a certain bit of money into, projects from can one, instead of waiting to the end of the year to see how much profit we had to invest, which, in COVID, it wouldn't be a lot, because, you're really suffering from a channel shutdown and, stock going off, etc. You could actually unlock 100 times that amount of water as the beer. Yeah. And that blew my mind, because you now have a really outsized impact that we bake in now to every single can, which has been extraordinary. So it's been a crazy year. I'm sure everyone has had a crazy year. Anyone listening or watching will say the same thing, but somehow uniquely you think that you've had the craziest one, I would imagine, because you have nothing else to compare it to. But it's one that, whilst I wouldn't repeat it, it's probably looking like it's been overall positive. I luckily haven't had anybody affected by COVID in a serious way. So I feel very, very privileged. I feel like I was in a privileged position to begin with. But I feel like we're getting out the other side, and things are starting to look much more optimistic. So I'm in a good mood.
So I'm glad you're in a good mood. Cheers to that. So it feels like, certainly what you've just said there, that the past year gave you and the team, Alan, that time to kind of maybe rediscover or take that time to, and I suppose we're maybe seeing the fruit of that time right now with your marketing, with your messaging, that you may not have had the chance to do that if we hadn't had this global pandemic. But just before we get into your kind of journey with Brewgooder and your whole entrepreneurial story as such, have you been running the business as Edinburgh? So are you based in Edinburgh? And is the team there, or is your team kind of all over the place? Or are you a virtual team anyway?
Yeah, so we were half Edinburgh, half Glasgow.
Right.
So James, who's effectively our co-founder, he's based out in Glasgow. So there's definitely a West Coast element to what we do. And the team was pretty much evenly split, between Glasgow and Edinburgh for about 4 or 5 years. Now, what's happened, which is quite remarkable, is that the business has actually shrunk quite naturally. Like, we've had people leave during COVID for other jobs, which is fantastic. And it actually got down to just James and I, and it had been for pretty much the latter bit of 2020, and then the first sort of 5 months of this year. And one of the things we did do was take on an interim managing director, somebody who actually knows what they're doing, because certainly James and I don't know what we're doing, but we haven't effed up too badly.
You're doing something right. You're doing something right there.
Something, but I don't even know what that is. But he came on, I think, part-time basis in February, and he's based down in England, and it's super, super strange because you're forming a really intense working relationship with somebody I've never actually even met, and he's coming up to Edinburgh to spend a week here next week, and I haven't actually seen him in 3D, which I think is very strange. But we've somehow managed to work for us a little bit. But you can, I don't know how to put it, but you could almost get fooled into, this is okay, so therefore we just do business as usual, but through Zoom. But I think next week we're going to find out, what is the benefit of the chemistry, I guess, that you have, that body language, just physical. I'm a big believer in a thing called haptic memory, or which is basically like touch. So if you go through a wood, or if you have a nice experience,
I try to. Senses really can let yourself pull the senses.
Exactly. So it triggers a different type of memory, I guess, or a different type of reaction. And I do believe that even just shaking hands or giving somebody a hug or whatever can foster some good feelings and vibes and stuff. So I feel like if we've done what we've done in the past couple of months, without human contact, if you like, I think hopefully that will be magnified by being in the same room as somebody.
So when this guy arrives in Edinburgh, and is it a fist pump? Is it a man hug he's getting? What's the Brewgooder welcome?
I love the elbow now. I think the elbow's cool. Like, even just doing that, like, it's far better than a handshake. Sometimes handshakes are awkward. Sometimes people do the big, power handshake. Sometimes it's not so power handshake. I think the elbow's cool. And me and my girlfriend actually do it sounds a bit weird, but we do a handshake, sort of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Jazzy Jeff style,
that's a bit weird, darling. I would just that's a bit.
But we've added in this, which is even weirder. So we do all that, and then we hit the elbows, and it's that's actually a natural extension. No one ever thought of doing it until COVID. When
that sounds like cool. you and your girlfriend are kind of working towards some sort of TikTok stardom.
Here, listen. To be honest with you, you've just given us a good idea.
There you are. So it sounds like this has been and obviously, challenging in some ways, but for you personally, we taking the time as a busy entrepreneur, reflecting what you're doing, where you're investing your time, but also as a business, really kind of going back to the kind of true value. Where are we as an organisation? What are we all about? When you look back at you're still young, Alan, a long way to go, and a lot of things to still achieve. But when you look back at your life thus far, when you were younger, did you have that, or did you have that, I suppose, entrepreneurial enterprising mindset at school? Did you recognise that as a thing at school, or did you arrive at where you are now through a conversation or through an accident? How did you get to where you are, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's a really interesting question to ask, to say, did you do anything entrepreneurial, or did you consider yourself as an entrepreneur as a kid? And I would say no, because the culture, I come from a rural part of Ireland, right? And there was business people and whatever. But when I was growing up, from almost day one of my secondary school, you were always almost going to be a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, or a teacher. And that was there was a strong sense that those were channels you had to go through. And if you didn't make it, then you went and became a joiner, and that, and this is not a ranking thing, but a joiner, a carpenter, or a joiner, a builder, a plumber. And it was vocational or, professional. That was it. There was no creativity that was assigned to the creation of value. And I would never have even thought of the term entrepreneur until, way into my 20s, I guess. But when I was in school, I did do one thing that was absolutely unashamedly, I think, entrepreneurial. I lived in we went to school where lots of different communities like effectively came together over like a 50 or 60 mile radius.
Uh-huh.
And there was in our canteen, we used to have this energy drink. I don't think you would be able to get it in schools these days, but it was an energy drink, and it was inside a fridge that was never turned on, so it was always warm.
What?
Right, exactly.
Hot
so
energy.
Yeah, exactly. And it was hotter than it would have been if you just had set it out the counter. But what I recognized was that there was a place, so it was £1, say, in our canteen. And what I realized was that there was a shop beside me that sold them for 50p, or it was a promotional window or whatever, it was 50p. But I kind of thought, right, okay. And the sort of subtext to this is that everyone had discovered that if you froze this drink, right, it was absolutely delicious. Like it just got better somehow by freezing it and then it breaking up again. So I thought, you know what? If the big challenge about the one in school is that it's too warm, and if everyone likes to drink it when it's almost basically just from going from ice to the juice again, why don't I buy loads of these? So like spend a tenner buying 20 of these things, put it in a freezer bag, ask my mum for a freezer bag, and bring it into school and sell it for £1. They're paying the same price and whatever. And I made a small fortune for a 14-year-old whenever I did that. And it was awesome. And I really got excited that I was creating something that people wanted. And I didn't really realize that at the time, but that whole enterprise came to a grinding halt by our school finance person. We called him the bursar. I don't know if that's the term that. Yeah. So and he basically brought me in and says, "You can't do this anymore. You can't sell. You're not allowed to. What if somebody
you've been too creative. You've been
exactly. But in my mind, it was like, oh, I'm doing the school.
People want this.
School and money, but I was like, but people want it. React to that. Fix your freezer or fix your fridge for a start, and I think there was lots of times when you, as a kid in Ireland, and I'm not saying I'm not trying to paint a negative picture, but it wasn't encouraged, right? It wasn't encouraged to do that. And then when I came to Scotland, I was quite fortunate. I got a few very, very, very lucky breaks. One was I started working at a place called Social Bite, which I'm sure some of your listeners will like. Thank you. And I was 23. I tried to get into water charities and stuff, and we'll come back to that because it does relate directly to Brewgooder. But I was at 23 given the responsibility to run a big event called the Scottish Business Awards, and my friend, he's now my friend Josh, he was my boss at the time, basically just says, here's the sort of script of this, go and do it, because I'm trying to grow this Social Bite thing. And the first year, I did it okay, but in the second year I felt like I was encouraged to take risks and try and make things better. And then eventually you started seeing things get bigger and better and more value created. And then on the Social Bite side, I thought, doing events and trying to think of creative ways to fundraise was awesome. So Josh and I would sit in the room and design basically things that turned into Sleep in the Park and World's Big Sleep Out. And for me, that was that. I very much think Scotland is extremely entrepreneurial. I think it's very dynamic, and I think there's a almost a tension between what people expect of the culture and what the culture actually is. And I think the culture is enormous, and there are brands and businesses and ideas that have ever originated in Scotland or grown up in Scotland in essence that have changed the world before, engineering. And I think there are things that are happening right now that in positive ways can change the world again. So I think being in Scotland has been something that made me understand what entrepreneurship was and try and have a crack at it, really.
And then I think what you're saying there is something that I champion a lot with organisations and that I support, is that whole sense of creativity, curiosity, the sense of play. I mean, it feels like at 22, you're actually getting to play. You're getting to be, and I mean play. I don't mean play as in, but being allowed, having that bit of autonomy to say, look, go and try. go and see how this goes. It needs to work, but go and see what we can create. And that's just such a gift, isn't it, to get that opportunity?
Yeah, and I guess you don't understand it as play at the time, but looking back on it, that is kind of what it is. It's like you have a sort of, you know, a sand pit or a sandbox or whatever to construct with, you know, whatever's there, you know, interesting things.
Yeah.
And definitely, you know, one of the things that I've 100% I think refound is that notion that, see, when you've hit a problem or a wall, or you're stressed about something in particular, the worst thing I think you can then continue to do is trying to force creative solutions to that from that position. And, you know, it might be a case where you take, you know, I've been lucky enough to just cycle around Arthur's Seat a few times. Suddenly the endorphins are running, you know, you're a different mindset, and you're more creative, and you're able to deal with things better. And I think that encouraging the play side of things, if you like, and I know, you know, cycling's not strictly play, but it's fun, it's enjoyable for what it is, right? Which is play. So, you know, the ability to actually start to learn to incorporate that into your working life surely makes your working life better in terms of both enjoyment, but also the output or the outcome of it.
Yeah, it's so important. And it's, I suppose, that different stimuli, isn't it? It's that whole, look, I've hit a kind of brick wall. I need to get out my own way. I'm not going to force myself to think of a new theme for a campaign. Let's go a walk or a run or a cycle. It comes back to this whole kind of wellness, well-being stuff. That releases all these things that help us think that wee bit more clearly, a bit more creatively. But I think it's something, it amazes me the amount of people, though, that don't associate themselves with creativity because it's been compressed out of them. So I think anything we can do to get people thinking creatively should be recognised. So Brewgooder, let's talk about Brewgooder then. Let's talk about this business that you have grown rapidly over the years. Alan, when did that epiphany happen? When did the moment happen that, now I know it didn't maybe just happen one night over a beer, but or maybe it did, but when did the Brewgooder thing become a hypothesis?
Yeah, I mean, it probably happened. I think there's an Ernest Hemingway quote, which is one guy asked another, "How did you become bankrupt?" And he said, "At the start, very gradually, and then all of a sudden." And I think that's kind of how I think Brewgooder sort of articulated itself, or percolated even before it was articulated. And I think that happened over years and happened through some lucky accidents, I guess. And I usually start whenever I'm, you know, doing a presentation, or if I saying, you know, the story of this pitch, or, you know, the reason I'm here is because when I was 22, I got sick from unsafe water when I was working in the fall. And that for me was a really kind of a slow burn, but a heavy vocational, if you like, realization that I was born in a place where I'd never had to worry about a really basic thing. And I think that the bandwidth that gives you means that you can go on to plan the future rather than the day to day. And I thought about, you know, being sick, and, you know, things just stopped working, but I got a prescription and I was fine within a week, and I went back to my normal life. But I really kind of honed in on the fact that when I started researching what water problems were, that, you know, a kid who was born on the exact same day as me, 30th of April 1990, born somewhere where water access wasn't a thing that they had the privilege of, they could have not made it past their 5th birthday. If they did make it past their 5th birthday, there's no guarantee that life was rosy after that. It wasn't like an entry exam. It would be hard and difficult. They would be trapped in cycles of poverty. They might not have been able to go or stay in school. If they were a girl, they might have to, you know, self-absentee every month, because there was no hygiene facilities. They would be held back, basically. And for me, that didn't really fit well with me. And I thought, because I'd been brought up to think that you can't not brought up to think, my experiences in school taught me that if you're going to affect something, or you're going to do something, you do it through a larger organization.
Yeah.
And my immediate thought was, let's apply for the Department for International Development grad scheme. Spent a year actually working in the Grosvenor Cinema in Glasgow, and basically every time every moment I got to study or to prepare for this graduate process that I did, and you know, eventually almost a year later, I ended up going to the selection day, and there was people in the room who were better at the corporate thing and better at the graduate thing than I was. I thought I was the team guy who made everyone contribute, and everyone was, very headstrong and, from Oxford or Cambridge, and I never got the job. And I spent a year basically trying to get that one thing that I thought would be the big break to be able to influence things on the water side. And then I guess I applied for everything and everything and anything after that. And I didn't get anywhere, and I got rejected from every single, job I really ever applied for. And then I came to Edinburgh for a weekend, met my friend Jack and then his brother Josh, and then we were playing, table tennis, and he just started up a sandwich shop, and I was a, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, whatever. And I was basically arrogant. I was like, why would I want to work for that whenever I spent 4 years or 5 years at university, and I've got this degree and stuff, and I want to change the world. But then he basically told me what the sandwich shop did, and at that time it was only giving out meals to homeless people, from a pay it forward scheme. And I was like, but that seemed more authentically trying to change something than even that thing I just applied for. So I just swallowed that notion that, one of my friends going to think of me if I start working in a sandwich shop. And then once I got over that, I realized that was just an unbelievable experience. You could build a brand that people cared about and interacted with that had a meaningful impact. But the byproduct of that was that I went from being a poor student to a poor graduate. And even though I was a poor graduate, I stopped buying cheap beer, cheap coffee, and started trading up. And I fell in love with Northern Monk, for example, who we just released a beer with today. I fell in love with all these brands, and my friends were super passionate about it, and they were really whether it was a local brewery or an American brewery or a weird style of beer, whatever, everyone talked about it. And for me, I was like, could you imagine if you tried to use that enthusiasm? And the more I thought about it, the more I actually think, well, beer is so reciprocal. Like, you never go out for a pint with somebody in a way, everyone's on a round. You buy a pint, you buy somebody a pint, somebody buys you back. Sure. And even in really masculine cultures, it's kind of like, I love you, you know what I mean? It's almost like a nice wee token of friendship, even if it's never said. And then I thought, could you use what is kind of a positive social force and point it at something I cared about? And I don't think we could have got away with the homelessness thing. I just think there was
people in there, and the maybe connotations potential
exactly
alcohol and homelessness.
Exactly. And it's much more nuanced than that, but I just don't think that was something I was prepared to battle against. And then I was like, well, what would I do if I cared about something? And the answer was kind of obvious, and it was Brewgooder. And then I tried to, I came up with the idea, the name Brewgooder, and I thought, this is too good to let go, if you like. And from there, it kind of just started to fall out of me rather than fall into place. And I started brewing beer, and it tasted like crap, and some of it exploded in my living room. And I was just like, I can't do it this way. I want to make something happen, and I want to give myself a target to work towards. And I thought, for 40 years of a career, what would be a meaningful figure to try and achieve? And for me, it was 1 million people, at that time. And then I asked, I wrote off a letter to James Watt from Brewdog. I guess under encouragement, I don't know if it was encouragement is the right word, but because at the time I felt it was quite weird. But I remember talking, and I know Tom Hunter really, really well, and I remember we worked on the Scottish Business Awards, and I sort of pitched this idea to everybody in the room, and rather than people say to me, "That's stupid, why are you doing that?" It was much more, okay, well, why don't you write to this person, or why don't you ask this person? And I thought, right, okay, cool. So
I'm going to do this.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? You hear a no, and you're not any different. Your feelings might get hurt, but that's by the head of it. But James, to his credit, just he's a busy guy, and just said, "Come and meet me in London. Talk about it." Pitched it to him. He said, if you sell the beer, we'll brew it for you, and you do whatever you want with the profit. So that, to me, started something where I was like, if guys like that can at least let it try, yeah, exactly, then why not? And the first 3 years, the first 5 years, I still don't think I know what I'm doing in a day-to-day sense. I feel like I'm moving towards something, and it hasn't gone all wrong. But we've learned so much through that journey that Brewgooder has gone through different iterations of what it stands for, and I guess one of the things that for me makes this moment really, really pertinent is that it's almost like that idea and that risk that we took back in the day has almost found its zeitgeist. Like people can't stop talking about purpose. Yeah. And one of the things that we said is that, we deserve to own that. Like, we started on purpose. We are brewed on purpose. Like, everything we do, we founded this business because we wanted to make something really positive happen. And I think that guiding light is the thing that has kept everything making sense. Yeah. So how do we maximize the impact that we have in the world? And for me, everything else is fluid around that. And you'll find ways to get to the most authentic version of that. And I feel like in the past, month or 2 months, that we've found a more authentic voice and a more authentic confidence and a look and feel and stuff. But I guess it kind of started, like I said, very gradually, and then all of a sudden.
I think it's that whole, when I think of a business mission or a business vision, never mind their values, I suppose your vision really isn't it? It's that whole, what you guys do is you brew with purpose. Yeah, that's the kind. Here's what we're about. We brew with purpose, and whatever we create profit wise goes in to deliver the vision of the whole clean water. And I think what's really fascinating about your story as well, Alan, is when that happened to you when you took ill when you were 22. At that time, that you didn't probably think then, you took an interest, absolutely, because you then went and done some stuff to try and get into that through the kind of normal approach of applying for jobs, the uni stuff, whatever. Then you get the opportunity, and you that moment of, actually, I'm going to create this beer. And actually, that thing that happened to me when I was 22, that's a powerful thing, isn't it? How that can come to be.
I mean, it seems so natural to me now, but I think it's so highly idiosyncratic. Like, what if I didn't get into beer as much as I did? Do you understand? Like, what part is the secret sauce element there? Is it the water experience? Is it the beer? Just is it being a 23? When I started Brewgooder properly, I guess it was 25. But like, what if I was a 25-year-old female or a person of color? Or, what if my life was in some way meaningfully different? What would be like, what opportunities would be open to me? What cultural role would I play? I'm a 25-year-old guy who loves beer. Like, I'm a cliche there, right? In many respects. And then I've had this water experience. So is it the water experience bit that transforms the whole piece? Or is it working with Josh at Social Bike? Or is it, somebody believing in you? What point does it all sort of?
It's a really good way to look at it, though, because you're thinking, actually, could you have done something with beer, but actually, with the time working with Josh from the social aspect, that gave you a different slant on actually
exactly
purpose. It's fascinating how it all works. So I'm conscious of time. I could speak to you for 4 hours, never mind 35, 40 minutes. Without getting into too much detail, a couple of things, Alan, before we get to the kind of final 3 questions, is that, one, what is the biggest, succinctly, quickly, if you can round it up for me, what's been the biggest challenge you've faced? I know people ask this all the time, but maybe even from a personal point of view, is it rejection? Is it been a brewery letting you down last minute? What has been the one single thing that comes to mind when someone says, in your journey thus far, what has been that biggest challenge I've had to overcome quickly? I mean, has it been COVID year? I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that this is probably very general, but I would say that the big thing that's probably continues to hold me back in particular is I definitely still feel like a bit of an imposter in the beer industry. Like, that for me probably stems from the fact that we don't have our brewery. We consciously work with other brewers to make amazing beers, because why not? Like, why not use that power for a powerful force? But it still makes you feel a bit icky. Sometimes you're in a room with, and I don't mean this in a corny way, but you're in a room with your heroes in many respects when you're trying to come up with these beers and these executions. So I think that definitely held me back, particularly the moment Brewgooder launched. I think that I was paralyzed almost for 6 months after Brewgooder launched. I genuinely feel, because I was too scared to make a mistake or to try and be creative in a way that, you know, could risk it all, because I didn't believe in myself. So I feel like, you know, and maybe other people feel this as well, but one of the biggest challenges I've always tried to, and I do it, you know, as recently as yesterday, I was questioning everything, trust me, like, is just having, you know, backing yourself. You know, on your best days, you're full of confidence, you're full of beans, but it's on your worst days, recognizing that your worst days only probably last for a day. And it's getting out of a mindset to think that that's the way it is forever. So this is a very, I think, holistic approach. But what I'm trying to say is, I've been my own worst enemy. I've been my own worst problem.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, I find that refreshing to. It sounds terrible. You find that refreshing to hear when it's someone like yourself saying, "Yeah, we'll have these days where we question everything." Because I think people on the outside looking in may have this impression that if you are fortunate enough to run your own business, to have a purposeful-led social business that's having a massive positive impact across the world in these 20 countries, that actually you are constantly on that high, when actually we all have these moments, don't we? And I'm not doing what you're doing, God, but you have all of those moments in this space where you reflect, you're saying to yourself, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right way? Is there an easier way to do this? There is that constant question, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the more we recognize that, and not try and suppress it or hide it from people, I think that can only be a positive thing. During COVID, I consciously spoke to the Herald to basically say we need a better entrepreneurial culture, because if I'm feeling it and you're looking at me thinking he must be, you know, 10 out of 10 every day, or, you know, over the arc of it, I'm thinking, imagine that everyone else is looking at everybody else thinking they're perfect and they're happy and I'm not. You know, can you actually have an entrepreneurial culture that moves away from the preppy American style, everyone's always pitching, to a much more, you know, actually mature and, listen, I'm just not on it today. I'm going to try and find a way to get my energy back and get back on in the game.
Yeah, being able to show that vulnerability in a safe space by saying, look, guys, we have crap days, and actually your Herald article was fantastic, Alan. I shared it and I read it. Two quick things.
Yes.
What's next for Brewgooder? And tell us very quickly about a visit. So I'm sure you've been to one of the countries, the 20 countries where you're supporting with the whole fresh water. Tell us very quickly about what's next for Brewgooder on the horizon, and how did it feel the first time you went to one of your places and seen a family, a young guy, maybe even someone your age, getting access to something that they didn't have before you guys supported them?
Yeah, so I guess what's next for us is that we're finally getting our act together. We think we're really trying to get what we do into bars and restaurants across Scotland in particular, and just to continue the awesome collaborations that we're doing, particularly around our work with the co-op. And it's annoying because all the stuff that I could say we're doing is like super top secret, but it's like only like 2 or 3 weeks away. But I think what we're trying to do is to actually stand up and be counted now in the UK brewing industry, and hopefully lay the foundations for what I think, and it's just a hunch, but what I think could be a potentially global beer brand. I think Brewgooder makes sense in the United States, it makes sense in Australia, it makes sense in Europe, and anywhere there's a big culture of craft beer, but also an understanding that, you know, their businesses should have purpose. So I guess that's the next big thing. When it comes to like meaningful experiences when I'm out there, like I sometimes I feel bad when we go out. Like I can't get away from that. I feel uncomfortable because I don't have to stay there. And no matter what good stuff we're doing, I always feel a little bit fraudulent in that respect. And I don't like the notion of you come in, you're the savior, and you leave again. I do cringe a little bit at that. But then you loosen up, right? People are people no matter where they are. And I think one of the big like takeaway moments, and it kind of still makes me feel a wee bit cringy, but it did happen, so I had to like learn to live with it. But so we were in a place called Pindani, which is just sort of central Malawi, And we were digging for the first time, that village was getting, like, the borehole was actually being sunk that day. And so we were out there and we were filming and we're doing whatever. And this, like, really elderly gentleman came over and basically said thank you to everybody that was visiting, you know, to watch the drilling. And for me, like, that was such a juxtaposition, because in the background there were, like, kids playing and, you know, everyone was super excited just because something different was happening. You know, when you're at school and you got a visitor, everyone would go crazy, and, you know, just that's the way kids were. But then I thought, actually, you know, he's saying that, and he's had his entire life without that access point for water that people knew was safe and wouldn't cause them, you know, health problems or whatever. And a kid born the next day, or, you know, a 3-year-old, 4-year-old who couldn't remember, you know, that, would just go their whole life hopefully taking that for granted. And for me, like, the joy and the beauty in that moment of the guy coming around, the joy and the beauty in that moment is that there might be no one has to think about that. That for me is beautiful. And whenever I do think about how many times that could happen over the course of what Brewgooder does, that's the bit, you know, because that is as close to my experience of life as possible. I didn't have to worry about that, and I plan a future. Like, kids, you know, in particular, should have that luxury as well.
Yeah, I love that part there. That actually I get from you there, Alan. That you don't. It's lovely to see. It's beautiful to see this story around that them getting that access to that water. But the main point for you is that it's good to just know that it's happening. That it's happening. That you don't need to see it all. The purpose is that that's happening. You've helped 155,000 whatever plus get access to that water, which is absolutely phenomenal. Anyway, we've got to that time where I'm going to take a sip of my Brewgooder, guys. Get the Brewgooder. Before we ask the final 3 questions, Alan, tell us, where can we, or how can we support you? So what is it we can do? Tell us quickly, what can we do to support you with this?
Yeah, you can buy that can, which is Mojo Juice Tropical Pale Ale, which is my favourite, my current favourite, because it's coming into summer. You can buy that in Asda across Scotland. You can buy that in Co-op across Scotland. You can buy it on brewgooder.com, and hopefully it will be in some really good bars and restaurants in cities near you over the summer.
I look like the guy, if you're obviously listening to the podcast, guys, you can't see this, but I look like the guy on The Price is Right. You need to guess how much you would pay for a product. And then
I think it's £2 just for the spoiler alert.
Well, it's delicious. So do what we can, guys. Let's do whatever we can to support Alan and his team with this incredible, purposeful social movement. Phenomenal achievement, Alan, and I continue to be admired, and I admire, I should say, and be inspired by what it is that you're doing. And everyone that's listening and watching, get out and buy a case. Get out and support this incredible, purposeful-led business. So 3 questions to wrap up, Alan, and then we'll let you get on. So we do this with every guest, and it's to share. Number 1, where's your favourite place to visit in Scotland?
It's not very far away from my house. I would say it's Portobello Beach. I love it. It's on a clear morning with a paddleboard. There's very few places better in the world.
Right. Cheers to Portobello Beach. Awesome. Second, your favourite quote. What's a quote as an entrepreneur, as a man, as a young guy? What's the quote that you go to every now and again for a bit of perspective or to just clear your head?
Yeah, I think the quote for me is, I'm going to butcher his name, but it's a German poet, right? I sound like an arsehole, but a German poet called Goethe, and he has a phrase, and I'm sure it's not the same in German as it is in English, but it's basically, where the danger is, the saving power also comes. And I find that a very, very, very encouraging motto, if you like, especially for these days, climate change, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like only when you recognize what's the problem is, can you actually address it? That's how I would interpret that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Very powerful from an entrepreneurial point of view as well, the whole problem solution stuff.
Yeah.
And the final one is the person that inspires you the most.
Well, I'm going to be very cheesy here and say my mom. She brought us up, you know, just to care about other people and to work for other people. And I think she needs as much credit as anything for the business that I ended up going on to build. And if she had had the opportunities, I'm sure she would have done amazing things. But she lived in Northern Ireland during the Troubles and not a great area. So she has had kids and grandkids that have gone on to do some really incredible stuff. So I think she's the most inspiring person, consistently throughout my life.
Awesome. What's your mum's name? Or your mom? Is just
Elizabeth.
This is dedicated to Elizabeth then. Elizabeth, I hope you watch this and listen to this. Thanks for creating this human being. Alan, thank you for your time. Thanks for all that you do in behalf of all the individuals across these 20 countries that you and your team and your customers have supported by providing this access to something that we take for granted every single day. Thank you. I wish you all the best in your future endeavours. And we, this Forever Great community, will do what we can to support. I'll share all the links to social media and to the website. Okay, folks, that's it for Forever Great Conversation, episode 4 with Alan. Please share, please get the Brewgooder message out there.